What's going on, guys? And I have an important announcement. As you guys have seen on Facebook, the Warcry Podcast now has a merch store through Redbubble. What you'll do is you'll hit that link below, select the logo that you like. You know, we got a wolf logo, we got that Bigfoot scratch or the Dogman scratch logo. Once you select the logo, you'll go down, hit your styles. If you want a T-shirt, if you want a sweatshirt, or if you want different things, or a sticker or whatever. You'll select the color of that, and then your size, and then you hit that checkout button. And hitting that checkout button and getting that T-shirt supports the podcast. And I appreciate everyone that listens, and it's amazing, and I do truly appreciate it. But with that said, let's get to the episode. So run me my music. What's going on, guys, and welcome to the 42nd episode of the Warcry Podcast. I'm your host, Jehola Tiger. This episode is going to kind of be, I would say, probably an observation podcast. But I'm going to be talking about a multitude of topics and reviewing some things that I've seen over the course of the last, week, 2 weeks. But the first thing I want to talk about is Dogz finale and the ending of that show. In my opinion, that might have been one of the best endings to a show that I've seen in quite a long time. If you haven't seen Dogz final episode or the last, season, skip now until you don't hear me talking about Dogz. But that show has meant so much to the Native American community, and what did I say? Native American community. Okay, anyway, it's meant a lot to us, and for it to be gone in 3 seasons, and I've mentioned this before, it's kind of like makes me sad because I think there's a little bit more. Like, I'd like to see Allura in college. I'd like to see Bear, holding the fort down and becoming a man. But I'd like to see what Big and Bev, if they end up, shacked up, or I'd like to see kind of the old timers hanging out and kind of doing some hijinks and some fun stuff. Hopefully, there's like a spinoff of that, but the final episode puts kind of the nail in the coffin. The second to last episode was basically Laura's dad and her coming, basically closure with her familiar life or her family life, and knowing that her dad was not a good guy when she was born, but he has come full circle and he genuinely cares about her and wants her in his life, and that's something that in a lot of, not saying a lot of Native American communities, but, those things happen in a lot of, communities. And for that to be depicted on television, like her not knowing her dad was white, she's, was kind of a funny thing, and for it to be Ethan Hawke was kind of even crazier. I popped at that. I thought that was awesome. But, it just brings it home that this show is so stinking down to earth. And it makes you feel like, an aspect of that is your life, because a lot of that stuff, I know a lot of Indians and white people can, and non-Indians can relate to this too here in Oklahoma. I think Eric Bailey said it best in the Tulsa world. It just is the epitome of what Oklahoma is. It's a lot of people living around each other. We don't always disagree, or we always don't agree, but we always figure out a way to make things work at the end of the day. And I think that's amazing about that show, and just really makes me feel proud to be Native and proud to be living in this part of the country. Even though our governor kind of sucks, but we ain't gonna get into that. Anyways, but that show was awesome. The ending, the final episode where they land, or where they're burying Fixico, for me brought in a lot of emotions, and it almost had me kind of tearing up because it reminded me of my people that have passed before me, and I'm glad that they depicted, picking that dirt up, and kind of holding it for a minute and giving your last bit and just, saying your last final words and then throwing that dirt in there. I know we did that for my aunt who passed away last year, I believe. Like, days of running by so fast, but yeah, and and the young ones digging the hole for the elder that's passed on is amazing. Depicting some of these things that we don't really talk about. We don't really, it's kind of just done. We just don't really, some people don't really talk about it. We just kind of just do it, but it's cool to see that on national television. Another thing I thought was amazing was a creek home. Is getting that creek house right, making sure it's properly put down there. They was trying to carry it like 30 feet. Like, nah, them things is heavy. Things are heavy. I thought that was awesome too, and kind of the elders, kind of sitting back, laughing, cutting up, talking crazy. I thought that was awesome too, because that is kind of how it is. I thought it was, I just thought it was awesome. Sitting back, drinking their coffee, and kind of putting, their friend to rest and bringing everybody back to the original group. Because, growing up, you always had a friend group, You had 3 or 4 of y'all, and y'all just all kind of hanging out. And then you kind of, go your separate ways, but then you always come back. And I thought that was just awesome. I just thought that ending was just so awesome, especially with everybody, Allure going to college, Bear, holding it down. His mom's moving to Tulsa, or is it Oklahoma City? I can't remember. Anyways, moving to big city, getting a good job and getting a promotion, and I just thought it was real good. And I'm glad that I'm glad that it was received that way too as well, because I know some people are, like I said, some people are not happy about the age discrepancy. I know I saw some things on that. People are not happy about the flashback episode, but it does bring into account, that we deal with the mental health, we deal with these things, even back then, I remember it's kind of a wild thing, but I saw this is, I'm not trying to pick on the old timers that listen, but I've heard this a lot, but they say back in the day, we never had no mental health, we never had autism or these types of things. We never had that. But then the microcosm of that is, sitting in the same chair for 30 years in the same spot, So, it's just cool to see that, he was dealing with some things, and, he wasn't right then, but then, when they go to break him out to go see Fixico, I think it was the last episode, and they got to share that moment together. I got real emotional, because, I hate that that's sometimes a way that we are to each other. Is that, they'll be around. We've been beefing for 5-6 years. I'll reach out to them when I do. But they didn't talk to each other for a lot of years, and it just was a real nice scene to see, them relatives kind of coming together again and sharing those last moments, and him being there for the funeral too as well. Man, like I said, I can't say enough to that last probably, that basically this last season, man. It was just an amazing season. I like when they were trying to break Graham Greene out, man. That had me dying laughing. Not Pat, Jesus. Bev and Big, man, their thing. And when Big was walking out and he has to tell, I can't remember the auntie's name, but she had come back in from Phoenix or wherever she was at, and he was like, "Hey, I'm seeing someone," and she kind of looked at him like, "All right." It's just funny, man, just funny. But if you have not seen Reservation Dogs, or Res Dogs, what we like to call it, everybody has a little Res Dog in them at some point. Go check that show out, man. All the seasons are on Hulu, or if you got FX or DirecTV, you can see it on that, or however you see it. But go check that show out. It's getting 5 out of 5 for me, getting 2 thumbs up for me, because it's just a great show. And I'm glad that Sterling Harjo was able to put that on. And hopefully he's not done, man. Hopefully he maybe does a movie, or we do like a fast forward and they're all old, and I don't know. It'd just be kind of cool to see how it shakes out at the end. But moving on. So I had watched and this is kind of I'm going to get on the soapbox here for a second, and I'm going to give some details, and I'm going to share kind of what my thoughts are and kind of how that story plays out. But I sat down and watched that 2010 Pat Tillman story. I think that's where I was getting at earlier when I was saying Pat. But Pat Tillman, that is such an interesting story. You could say case. But to me, I just think that's a very nasty, nasty way that our country depicts things about people. And why I say it's nasty. So Pat Tillman, if you guys didn't know, I'll give the story. He was an odd guy, like a very odd guy. Played high school football. Ended up getting a scholarship to Arizona State and played and was a pretty good player for Arizona State in the early 90s. Early to mid 90s. And then was drafted in the 7th round by the Arizona Cardinals. And he became an All-Pro. He never took after his first contract was done. I think they said that he only made minimum, the league minimum his entire career. But the Arizona Cardinals were wanting to sign him to a long-term big deal, like millions and millions of dollars, because he was an All-Pro, he's All-Pro safety, and he turns it down. After 9/11 happens. He, kind of mulls over if he wants to join the military or not. And he ends up going. And he goes through all the training, and then he gets the special training, and he becomes a U.S. Army Ranger. And he was killed in the line of duty in 2004, I believe. And it's very sad in that story because he was killed by friendly fire. But it's also very nasty, and this is why I say it's nasty, is the government lied to the family. And the family thought it was weird, during his funeral, it was on national television. His family, was very honored by the military to honor their son because they didn't know what exactly happened to their son. And originally, the official story was, he was killed in the line of duty protecting his comrades against the Taliban. And that wasn't the case at all. He was killed by his own people, and then that's where it came out. Well, the family thought it was weird, and so they asked for all the documents, and all the documents came back heavily redacted. Names, places, dates, timelines were all redacted. So the family had to go through and unredact and place in letters and words to these unredacted memos. Well, the family comes out and they're basically upset, and the military comes out and comes clean and basically says it was friendly fire, it was confusion, given the whole military thing. Well, during that time before they did that, and I think this is why I really am not a big truster of anything mainstream or kind of major news like CNN or Fox, is they were running him like he was a hero, and they putting him all over the place and basically saying, if Pat Tillman could do it, you can do it too. Sign up, with the U.S. Army, or sign up with the military, or sign up here. Basically pushing enrollment into our military and using Pat Tillman's name as a way to do that. And it later came out that Pat actually didn't, once his enlistment was done and his contract and commitment to the military was complete, he didn't want any ties to the military at all. He wrote it multiple times on his enlistment sheet. I do not, once my, commitment is fulfilled, I do not want a military funeral. I don't want anything. If I'm killed in action, don't want anything to have to do with the military. He wanted done with the military. And during his funeral, they gave him, all this military stuff and gave him, all these honors and these medals. And his family, his brother said it best. Like, Pat's an atheist. He did not care about God. And all these military people are saying Pat is with God and really trying to pump up that the Christian right political type rhetoric that Pat was a man of God, but his brother came and said he's an atheist. He didn't believe in anything. He didn't believe in anything, but he believed in everything. And Pat was a weird guy. Pat Tillman was a very strange guy because he read everything. Like, he had like all these books, and he was very well read. And the Army kind of depicted him as to the public. He's a meathead football player, and that's not really who he was. And during his time in training, he had all these books, and he would constantly read, and he would talk about these things with his people. And during the documentary, and this is how I kind of thought it was very strange, with his death, that he was killed by friendly fire, is there was a sergeant in his unit is like, came out and said, yeah, me and Pat didn't really agree on things. He didn't like the way I talked to him. He told me to F off multiple times, and I eventually had to corrective action him. And in the military, that could be anything. And so Pat and this guy that was on the documentary, who agreed to come on the documentary, basically were not, in the best of, terms, I guess you could say. In the military, to this day, it says, oh, it was confusion. This is why, it was murky out there. We couldn't see anything. But later on, so as all this stuff is coming to light, there was a gentleman, his last name was O'Brien. It was Corporal O'Brien. He was just in the military, and Pat took a liking to this guy. So Pat kind of protected him because Pat was kind of making his way, up the rank because he was doing well. And O'Brien was very, shouldn't be out here. He just was not good at being a ranger. And Pat took him under his wing and was trying to get him trained up, make sure he was right. And basically Corporal O'Brien, followed Pat everywhere. So Pat said, hey, let's go up this mountain. And so O'Brien and I think it was Bear was the other guy's last name. I can't remember his first name. Preston, I think. Anyways, but these two soldiers or U.S. Army Rangers and Pat were told to go up on the hill to scout to see the road ahead. And so they go up there, and verbatim, and they had and they also had an Afghani soldier with them who was helping them. And so they go up there, and as they're making their way down on the opposite side, that's when they started taking fire. They killed the Afghani soldier, which is, to me, nasty as hell. They killed him, put like 20 rounds into him, and then Pat was trying to, scream at them, hey, I'm Pat Tillman. And those two soldiers watched every single thing. And they told in the documentary, I believe they told the truth. They said it wasn't a misty day. There was no cloud cover. They knew what they were shooting at. And they kept, trying to, ward them off, like, hey, So Pat had the idea to throw a flashbang up ahead of the road, which may have not been the best thing, because now they're like, oh, we're under attack. And the soldiers in the military to this day say, without a shadow of a doubt, that they were being shot at by Taliban. Well, it came out once, they read all the documents, that it wasn't, they basically were just itching for a fight. A lot of those soldiers who were in that squadron. They were itching for a fight, and they wanted to shoot something. Well, the military to this day will say, oh no, there was an accident. But my thought is too, when that sergeant came on, it was like, yeah, Pat was very insubordinate and blah blah blah, this and this. It kind of told me like, oh, okay, that's very interesting. So then Pat, his last words were, I am Pat effing Tillman. And then he was killed, shot. And eventually the fire stopped, and the soldiers realized, oh, we're shooting at our own people. And as they start to investigate, the parents are sending in, like, they're trying to figure out a way how to get this looked at. Well, Pat Tillman Sr. sent in an email, because he's a lawyer, he's an attorney, put in a crazy, like, the way he worded this was like, man, like, he knows some things. And at the end he said, "Go F yourself. We know what y'all did. Y'all covered it up." Military reopened up the case, and they found that the general, who was a 3-star general at the time, was at fault because he had ordered those guys to be split up, and that it was under his leadership that the most famous soldier that may have ever, besides, the presidents before, there's been presidents that have served, but have never been on the front lines like Pat Tillman, that he is to be blamed for this. And during that time, it come out that general and a bunch of other 4 or 5-star generals, the president, the Secretary of Defense, Rumsfeld, they all knew about Pat's friendly fire like the day after. And there was a memo sent out during that time that said, "Hey, Pat Tillman, it was a friendly fire. Like, I need you guys to understand this is a friendly fire. And we killed our most famous soldier." Well, when Pat enlisted, Pat was sent a letter from Donald Rumsfeld that said, "Hey, we appreciate you. Thank you for joining. We will be keeping tabs on you." And an email was sent out from Donald Rumsfeld to all the generals, basically saying, "Hey, we need to keep tabs on Pat and make sure that he makes it through his enlistment." And I thought that was very interesting too. So Rumsfeld and all the generals were aware that Pat Tillman was a U.S. Army Ranger and that he was at the front lines facing the Taliban. So during that time, they go to a grand jury. This is, I want to say it was like 2017. It might have been 2008. It was during Obama's presidency. And they call back all these generals, and basically they sit them in front of Congress, in front of this oversight committee, and nothing happened. They basically, all of them said, "I don't remember, I don't recall, I'm not sure," or like they kept making edits to the record, like, "For the record, I don't recall," and it was a mess. And they ended up closing the case after that, and it's just swept under the rug after that point. And to this day, I know even like 2017, Donald Trump retweeted something that said, about when it was Colin Kaepernick was taking the knee and things like that. So they've portrayed Pat Tillman as this symbol for being heroic, and yeah, he is a hero. Like, he stood up to a lot of stuff. Like, he was a gay rights activist. He was very opposed to the war, and he made that very clear to a lot of people. And that might have been one of the reasons why, these other soldiers didn't like him. He was in the middle of Iraq. He thought he was going to Afghanistan, but they ended up sending him to Iraq. And his second day there, when we were bombing, when America or the U.S. was bombing the entire city that Pat Tillman was at, he was very disgusted and he wanted out. And he even, right before he passed, he went to his old football coach, who was now, I think, at the Tennessee Titans, or I can't remember where he was at. But basically, told him, it's like, "Hey, when I'm done with the military, I'd like to come back and play football for you and you only." And so it's just very sad. I watched that documentary. It's on Tubi right now, and it's called The Pat Tillman Story. If you want to go watch it, I'm probably missing some details, but that's pretty much the whole crux of that documentary. But go check that out, man. It just made me feel like our country, like we're like the villain, like we're like Darth Vader to everybody, and we sit here with our our hubris, and we're not, our things aren't even right. Like we're so focused on everybody else, we're not focused on ourselves, and it's just very nasty the way the way that, I'll say the right wing and now the left wing have continued to use Pat Tillman in a way to boost up enrollment and pass along political ideologies that that make people want to join the military. So that's just, I don't know, that's just, those are the two kind of things that have kind of been on my mind and I've been thinking about as of late. And if you're, like I said, I'm not trying to hate on anybody who's Christian, or if you believe, or if you go lean right wing, or if you lean any type of way. But if you go back and like I said, watch the documentary, they used him and he wasn't that way at all, the way that they were using him. And that's, if you can't agree with that, if you can't say that's nasty, then I don't know what to tell you. Like, I'm just a guy with opinion and sharing information, from his family, and those are testimonies from his family. And like I said, I'm neither here or there when it comes to politics. I'm just a guy, basically. But I just thought it was very nasty that they used him in that light, and he did not want to be represented, and he didn't want no statues. He wanted nothing. He just wanted to sail off into the sea, play football, and do his thing. And that's that's just kind of what we do here in this country. We like to exploit tragedies and things, shortcomings of people. We just like to do those things, I guess, in this country. But I appreciate everyone that's listening to this episode. I know, like I said, these are just some two things: Res Dogz and the Pat Tillman story. Go check those things out. It's a very strange time. Like we're moving to some things that that I'm just kind of like, man, this is kind of wild. But we're finding dinosaurs on different islands, which we'll get to that. They're finding ancient artifacts that are changing history. We'll get to, like I said, all these things we'll get to. There's a theory that we've made up a section of time. That's why there was no creations in that time. It's just, there's a lot of things being unearthed at that's happening at this time in history and in this point in our planet that I'm glad that's happening, and it's just very, very, very strange. But you guys can message me on Facebook, Yehola Tiger. Send me a story. We're looking at doing possibly, I'm going to put a poll up. If you guys want This Is Creepy 4 on Halloween, you let me know. Send your stories in. I got a few stories lined up. That we can do probably a 30-minute episode on some creepy stuff. Or if you guys want me to do a special guest, I'm going to have that poll out there too as well. Also, TikTok and Instagram, Warcry Pod. Go follow those. I'm trying to get some more content up on TikTok. Kind of been faltering. It's been a busy week. This episode is going to be coming out next week. So the OU Texas game. If you're craziness. That's all I'm going to say. But I appreciate everyone that listens in to the podcast, and it's very much appreciated. And I'll catch you on the next one.